Edith Valladres-McElroy, and this is Latino Profiles in English. Now, I don't know if you heard the first part because we did it in Spanish before, so we're continuing this interview with Maestro Eduardo Cedeño. Hello, how are you again?
Thank you for having me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I know that this for you, this is like the continuation of what we were talking about before.
Sure.
But for other audiences, they may not know who you are, so maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit and the things that you have done, and then we pick up with the last piece, which we were talking about teaching young adults and teenagers and such, you know, for music purposes. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I was born in Caracas, Venezuela. I was very fortunate to have my parents being involved in music, especially my father was involved in opera, and it still is, still alive, he's 86. And my grandfather, his father. And both of them involved so much and so and fanatic about the opera. So that was my beginnings. So it was no unusual for me to recite or sing something at any minute. And to that point, when my mother, she stopped her education to have 3 of us. Later on, she finished up her education, and during her graduation, I performed, singing an aria for the opera. So people thought I was very talented, but to me, it was like I just doing what I learned at home.
And how old were you then?
The time my mother graduated, I was about 7 or 8 years old. But my older brother had recollection. I do some to some degree that I performed on television at 4. And I did Sole Mio. Oh, okay. And I remember vaguely, but I remember the organist, and I remember it was a blind person, and he used to play that white organ. Because I remember he asking me, you know what key you're going to sing this? And I had memorized.
4?
Yeah, I had memorized the keyboard about this tall, and I memorized what key to start. So I played a G, and I knew how to screen and actually play the G. He said, right here. And so I told him. So he just took off. And I performed on television for a fundraising show. And that was just basically my beginnings. But you as a child, you don't know what talent is or not. It's just repeating what I heard in the old-fashioned LPs of those days.
Yes. And then you started playing violin.
Later on, being in the school, the music teacher spotted me doing certain things like I do today with my kids. Hey, you have a special talent. Let me talk to you. So one day I was playing in the school, baseball, some other thing, and she called me. And I remember clear that day because she put me really in my place. And she came in. She was driving her nice Mercedes-Benz white, and she was yelling at me, come over. And I thought I was in trouble. And then away I was, academically. So she sit down here. What are you doing playing? You have a gift. You have to respect your gift. And she was kind of upset. In the meantime, something was running in her car. It was a Mozart piece. And you know what that is? And I said, yeah, well, it's Mozart's 40th Symphony. I said, things like that, she said. How do you know that? Well, we had it at home. For me, it was a big deal about it. And said, so during our conversation, she said, you know what just happened? The music changed. Well, it went from Allegro to Moderator. See, we need to go to School of Music. And she introduced me, her name was Maria, and she introduced me to the School of Music, and the rest, basically, history. And there I discovered to play the violin, and that's what I've been doing since.
Yes. And then your beginnings, when you were basically a member of an orchestra.
No, at that time. That came much later. At that time, that's a good point, because it was a big disconnect between the School of Music. There were 3 well-known in Caracas, and the big orchestra, the professional orchestra, the Venezuela Symphony Orchestra. Okay, but at that time, it was probably 90% of the members were from Italy, came from the World War II. They just eradicated themselves in different places in South America and other places. So the rehearsal actually were in Italian. Most of my teachers were Italians. So there was a big disconnect. It wasn't until later they started, we want to talk about this in a minute, we started developing orchestra due to Maestro and Dr. Jose Antonio Abreu. They kind of broke that pattern and they started introducing orchestras at many levels. So my beginning were I went to my teachers, not just to know about music, but know the craft, to know the business of the music, and at the same time I was singing. Talking about singing, I was singing in a choir, very prestigious organization of 30 members in those days. There was a handpicked by Maestro Alberto Grau, and I participated in 1974 international competition in Arezzo, Italy, and we won the first prize. And being so young, I was, I think it was, by that time I was about 19 years old, and I thought, wow, I'm on top of the world. Nothing higher than this at that time. And it was. I mean, it was so incredible. But that was a huge beginning for me. And that really sealed that that's what I want to do the rest of my life. So graduated from high school, I got a job in music, conducting choir, and then continued my career at the same time.
So you were 19 when you were conducting the choir?
No, I was conducting, but I was a member of the Escola Cantorum, Escola Cantorum of Caracas. And but then I had a job conducting as well in a private school choir. And that's how my career started. And then later on, that was in 74 and 75, Maestro Abreu, Jose Antonio Abreu, started what is known today as El Sistema. It started the youth orchestra in Caracas. And, which is, by the way, speaking of that, he made a call to different school of music to come to a rehearsal. I didn't participate on the first rehearsal, and a very kind contribution, as he mentioned in his interviews, it was donated 50 music stands, expecting him to have 100 kids who participate the first day. That didn't happen that way. Only 11 show up. I wasn't there. But as he was recollecting his memories, he was talking about those 11 kids told him, either I stop this right now, it's not working, it's perhaps a moment of negativity on his part, or I turn this into one of the biggest orchestra ever, which is what's happened today. Later on, a month or so later, you got to be part of this. I mean, the voice went all over. And then I show up with my violin, and sure enough, by that time we had more than 60, 70 members. Everybody participated. It was so fascinating. But the biggest part was him. I mean, he was a dreamer, a person off chart, totally. And taught us so much about breaking the mold of the time and think big. The magic of thinking big, as a book that I was reading one time. And that was him every day. So much teaching, but also dreaming about what is possible.
Yeah. Where does the word El Sistema come from in terms of what the orchestra is like?
Well, that came later. I mean, there was the system, how they go about doing things. And I think it started, I think at the beginning of that development of the orchestras, it came like a year later. And by the way, I got something here to show you. We started in 75. Through that year, we start, stumbling perhaps a little bit, but we really started the development of the orchestra. A year later, we did a trip to be part of this International Festival Youth Orchestra in 1976. And we went to Scotland, went to Aberdeen, Scotland, and then we went to London to participate with a bigger orchestra. And I think that was really was to the governor of Venezuela that this is for real. Here we're here to stay and to develop this. That's how it really started. Later on, it transformed into what is called now El Sistema. The system, they bring the kids for all walk of life to participate in music and transform the country, other countries today, into what it, to develop kids and put it in in the different path of development.
And that El Sistema is still in place.
It's still in place in many countries, yes.
Yeah, and do we have any people that may be recognizable by our audience that have come out of that?
Yeah, I guess we have to mention the top of my list could be Gustavo Dudamel.
Right.
Gustavo Dudamel, I mean, it's incredible, the talent, the so much energy, and he's an icon. He shows what I call the possible. He can do it, we all can do it.
Yes.
And he's now a conductor of the Philharmonic in Los Angeles.
And you, sir? Okay. So tell me, I know that you're very humble. I know that. But the way I figure it, you began, the whole thing began with you, if you think about it. And then Gustavo, because there are two generations, the separation right there. But if you think about it, everything that you have done, and I know that you don't want to tell us about it because you're too modest and too humble, but I have read your resume, and you were basically, you were Gustavo when Gustavo was a baby. So tell us about that.
Well, in reality, thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
but in reality, all that group at that time, 75, 76, and those years, all of them, I mean, just so much talent, and they're all over the place. I'm as a violist. I got some of them in Miami and different places in Europe. There's so much talent, and people conducting orchestras. I don't know what's it's a huge transformation for Venezuela at that time, and it is still till today. And I was part of that. I guess I have to say I was blessed to be in the right place at the right time. And they had those incredible and humble beginnings. And yes, you said it correctly. I mean, that was a platform for Dudamel to grow in. But his talents, it's off chart too. It's so gifted. Yeah.
Well, something that I admire a lot about you, and I'm going to tell you, even if you disagree with me, is that you decided to become a teacher for other kids, to probably have the same opportunities that you had when you were growing up. Because as you were mentioning before, you had a household in which music was valued. And then you see other kids that may have some talent, and they're very talented, but they may have not had the same opportunities when they were growing up. And then you take them in. Because this is basically what you're doing right now. And that's that wonderful, anything that we can do to pass our knowledge to others, that's the best thing that we can do. So, and you're doing this right now when you started working with those schools near to this area. So tell us about it, because that's a wonderful work that you're doing.
I think my appetite for teaching started in high school, because we had a choir conductor, which I didn't like. My older brother didn't like it either. Was not up to par what we were doing at the moment. Sorry to say, but that was what happened. And the person disappeared. We don't know what happened. We're students. We don't know what happened in the administration part of things. But we didn't have a choir, so they thought. So I stood up to it, and my brother did too, and he played piano, my older brother, and said, we can do this. So we talked to the principal at the time, did not agree. We did it anyway. There was a time of, you try to be stubborn in high school, and you do. And so we started in, surprise, I guess, we started doing the choir, and teachers started participating on this event. And said, I can do this. And I guess I put one foot in front of the other, and from that time to today, I think I can be a performer, but yet I can teach as well. And pass on everything I have learned through time, and still today, updating myself, pass it on to kids. Yeah.
And also you keep learning all the time, because you mentioned that you were going to
so much to learn, so much things are new software out there to learn music. Too much things are valuable. No, we cannot sit down and enjoy what did happen. That's good, but we need to be updated totally.
Yeah. Okay, so now we go back to the segment where we left it before. It was about the kids that you have right now. How do you recognize the talent that they have? What do you do to make sure that they grow to be even better?
I think you can see in their eyes. Kids have passion, even those who are not as inspired, those, if they're a part of a synergy where we can have a group of kids that are already talented and incorporate those others, they're not there, they can develop, right, the appetite for do more, something different, something out there. I do it through music, but arts in general. And right now here in North Carolina, when I came here in 2005, as I was surprised there were not a lot of orchestra. I understand part of that budgeting, but at the same time was no there. I mean, with a lot of bands and choral activities, and they're doing great, but no orchestra with the strings and woodwinds and the brass and percussion as we know it. And I said, well, time to work. So that's what I've been doing. And right now, we implemented with a group of entrepreneurs that El Sistema here in Charlie. Okay, so tell us how many schools are involved in this activity that you
right now that I know,
through a group of entrepreneurs, they're putting this together from the Kiwanis, especially Robin Knott, that's the spearhead, and her group putting this together. We started, they started school in, I think it's called Blythe, which is in Huntersville, and that's going to be the pilot where we're going to transfer. The success of that group is going to be transfer all the schools around the area that has much need.
And that's going to be a public school?
That is,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Because that's another thing also, that when we talk about the differences, you know, in the kids and the financial means of kids that go to private schools. And then I think El Sistema was based basically in the fact that it was for everybody.
It was for everybody, and it is for everybody, especially targeting kids that have special needs, financial and education. Target those kids to change from the bottom up, you know, their families and their neighborhoods. And as Jose Antonio Abreu said, orchestra is like a community. And we try to do in a community effort to change, you know, people's lifestyles and show what is possible.
And you were telling us before about the attitudes of the students, that sometimes they're kind of misbehaving, and then when you talk to them, well, all of us were a little bit. So when you tell them, you know, all the possibilities and how they can channel their emotions through the music and the talent that they have, tell us about that.
The inspiration that I got in my own system, my own spiritual being, that I got from those days of my beginnings, that I still keep today, is that they go quiet listening. It's the same effect that I see today. But I believe I speak without voice, because that's what I learned. I internalize what I learned in those days, and I keep on learning. So I give it to them. This is what it is. Never see things as they are. Just see things as they can be.
Right.
Because you're the new generation. Look out there. So something new for you. So when they complain or just do whatever, like I was doing, about whether it's money or was too much distance or whatever those little things, is just think about where you're going to put your stake up, where you're going to put that dream. How far is it? And we're going to adjust it 1 inch at a time to get there. But that's how I started. There's a stake way out there, but we're going to go inch by inch to get there. You don't restless.
And do you see that change in the kids when they start and they're like kind of hesitant, and I like this, but I would rather be elsewhere?
I like the kids today have a different vision. I think this era of a synthesis we live in, we keep everything in a little device. The phone does everything. It's computers, everything. Kids are learning differently than I learned. We learn by stages. But kids will learn things by intuition.
Yes.
I have a choral in the community school of Davidson, I mentioned. If they start making a composition, an arrangement, and they're fixing. My master degree is in music theory, so I was taking notes intellectually. They move that note here, do all by intuition, because it's in them. And that's what I try now with the new kids. We need to teach that way, how to do things by intuition.
And also with all the technology that is available right now, and the kids being so savvy from the very beginning, do you incorporate that too?
Yes.
How do you do that?
Sometimes we don't have the money, the resources to have everything we need to have. But in my school, I have, and I've been furnished with things like finale or sibelius, things that helps. See, I grew up doing calligraphy in music.
Right.
That's not necessary. So now we can use that, and we're still in the baby steps to what I wanted to do, where kids are going to get on the computer and compose and do the things that we did not too long ago, but now doing it differently, do it on the computer and utilize what is available today.
Yeah. Now, tell us something, because before we were talking about when you conducted Carmina Burana at that time, and it was by memory. I didn't know that. I saw the video, and it was impressive. The whole production was impressive. Tell us about that, because somebody who can memorize all of that. How? I mean, I don't remember why I went.
That's what conductors are supposed to do.
Okay.
But Carmina Burana was presented in Caracas, Venezuela, in 1970. I participated in it. I was just a little baby. Mm-hmm. But the conductor of that event, it was so charismatic. I memorized not just my part. I was so impressed by the piece itself, but also impressed by the conductor of that time. And I was, his name was Gonzalo Castellano Yumar. And I was memorizing as all the rehearsal unfold. And so later on with an orchestra that I had on my hand from Venezuela, I said, we're going to bring an orchestra to the Pan American Games. It was celebrated in 1987 in Indianapolis, and that will be the piece for the kickoff for that event. That piece was presented in the opera theater called Teresa Carreño's in Caracas, and I remember almost stroke by stroke how the conductor did it. Since that time, of course, I do some study, but right. It was in me. Mm-hmm. So as well other pieces. So I thought it was a task of a lot of work, but it was possible, and that was the piece that I chose for that event. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carmina Burana.
Yes, and it was a wonderful piece, and I hope that we can incorporate some to the B-roll of this show. Okay, so now, do you feel the same thing that your kids feel when they perform? Because they are all there wearing their best, performing their best, and having this audience watching them, which is completely different from the rehearsals. So does that make you feel the same way that they do? Are you excited? Are you nervous still after all these years?
I still get nervous. I get butterflies. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I get those butterflies information. Sometimes I don't. My kids that know me today, they know that. They tell me, Mr. Cedeño, just relax. I sweat. I guess through time I have developed some comfort, but I don't want to. I've been very comfortable, and I don't like it. It's not very good, but I don't want to be too nervous either. So I control that to a degree, and I teach that. I teach what to remember, what to do when the moments happen, what to drink or eat or think about, what to pray on, and those things that I teach them. The way I have internalized it, and it does work for me.
And what do you tell them when they're ready to go out there with their...
You got to remember your first line.
Okay.
If you're in opera, just remember the first... If you've done your homework.
Right.
Remember your first line. What's it look like? And how you're going to move. And the conducting is the same. What's it going to look like? How are you going to look on stage? Are you going to smile? All those little things, it helps me. But I do personally, and everybody will do it different, but I do a lot of prayer myself.
Mm-hmm. And after the performance, what happens?
I'm so glad it's over.
Yeah. And what do you tell them?
There's a lot of tension, a lot of preparation, and you concerned about it. Handouts are being, delivered to the audience. Do a good impression. It's educational to the audience. It's educational to the kids, and you're in that pressure, I guess, mm-hmm. Because you're there in the middle. The orchestra responding, the choir's responding, but also you got an audience right behind you, picking up on things. So I always try to make it educational.
Yeah, and you feel a huge responsibility for what those students are going to do after they finish with you?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I want them to be, that was a stepping stone for what's next. This is great, and let's celebrate. Because in all this going on, it's good to do a pause and look back. This is great. But during that, particularly climbing a mountain, then you get up there and you do a pause and celebrate. But from that moment, from that particular tip of the mountain, you look at, oh, there's something else to look at. Because now you're on top of the mountain. And so, but it's good to celebrate, to do a pause and celebrate. Celebrate is wonderful for the spirit, but it's a wonderful achievement as well.
That's beautiful. Okay, so now it's time to go, for real. Thank you once again. You have no idea how much this means to me and everybody who is watching, that we have this talented person sharing with so many young people and making us so proud. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, and we'll connect again, I'm pretty sure. And thank you all for watching us, and please come back to us later on. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Show it in Spanish.